Lesson 1, Light and the Electromagnetic Spectrum. Our goal for today will be to understand what the electromagnetic spectrum is and how it appears in everyday life. To get started with a minds-on, think about what is light. Certainly light is something that we all know of, but to come up with a description some sort of a quantifiable description can actually be quite challenging. So take a moment to do that, pause the video, and when you're ready, click play to resume. Okay, here we go. So it turns out that light, or what we often call visible light, is a portion of something called the electromagnetic spectrum that can be detected by the human eye. We will get more into this throughout the unit. But just consider something. Look in the room around you. The fact that you can see objects is because light is reflecting off of them and entering your eye. Or if you're looking at a computer screen, that would be a source of light, and that light is entering your eye. So the way that we interact with light is through our eyes. As far as we know, nothing in the universe can travel faster than the speed of light. Think of it like a speed limit for how fast objects in our universe can travel. And just for fun, the speed of light is... And just for fun, the speed of light is on the order of 3 times 10 to the 8 meters per second. That's the number 3 followed by 8 zeros. Just to put this in context, light can travel approximately 300 million meters in 1 second. It's the fastest thing in the universe. So earlier I mentioned that light was a small portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. The light that we're able to see with our eyes is a type of what's called electromagnetic radiation. Now, just because the word radiation is there, don't worry. This doesn't mean that light is a bad thing. Certainly some type of light can be damaging, like UV light. This is why if you're out in the sun too long, you can get a sunburn. But other than that, the light that we can see with our eyes is harmless. So don't worry about the word radiation. In terms of what causes light or electromagnetic radiation, it's due to oscillating electric and magnetic fields, or when electricity and magnetism combine together to form a wave or a chain of energy. And that energy travels through space in the form of a wave where it can be utilized by living organisms. For example, the Earth gets its electromagnetic radiation from the sun. That energy travels from the sun to the Earth, and lucky for us, plants have figured out how to use that energy in the form of photosynthesis in order to make sugars, which we then eat and use as a source of energy for ourselves. Okay, so once again, the light that we can see with our eyes is just a small portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. Throughout this unit, we're going to learn about different types of electromagnetic radiation, and as you'll see, it's not just limited to visible light. At this point, please watch the YouTube video below. This video summarizes the different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, and when you're done that, come back to this video. All right, you're back. So electromagnetic radiation is really just energy that travels to us in the form of a wave. And you know it's energy. This is why if you stand out in the sun, you can get a sunburn, or if you go walk on your driveway on a bright sunny day, it's really hot and burns your feet because the driveway has absorbed all of that energy from the sun. So this is definitely something you can relate to in your everyday life. Because light is a wave, we have to look at a few properties of waves. One of the first properties we're going to look at is something called the wavelength. The wavelength describes the distance between any two identical parts on the wave. And this can be shown in the picture below. So for instance, the point I'm marking over here is identical to the point I'm marking over here, and the wavelength is just the distance between those two identical points. In a similar way, you can also measure the wavelength from this peak to this peak. Or alternatively, this minimum point down here to this other minimum point down here. All of these distances are identical, so you just have to pick any two identical parts on the wave, measure the distance, and that would be the wavelength of the wave. Another way to think of it is it's the minimum repeatable distance on this traveling bundle of energy. A second property of waves is something called the frequency. The frequency tells you the number of wavelengths, remember that minimum repeatable pattern, so it tells you the number of those wavelengths, or cycles if you will, that pass by 1 point per second. We measure it in units of hertz. These units of hertz are equivalent to inverse seconds. What I mean by inverse seconds are 1 over units of seconds. So we measure time in units of seconds. If you take the reciprocal of that, you have a unit of frequency or hertz. So let's take a look at the picture below. I'm going to highlight one wavelength. Remember we said it was the distance between two identical points on the wave. So for instance, this would be one wavelength over here. And the frequency is how many of those cycles that pass by 1 point each second. So waves usually have a direction associated with them. Remember, waves are just traveling bundles of energy, and let's assume that this wave is moving left to right. As this wave travels left to right, a certain number of these wavelengths will pass by 1 point. That's what we mean by frequency. In the picture over here, we're going to compare high and low frequency waves. So if you compare the two, what you're going to notice is that in the low frequency wave picture, the wave is a little more stretched out. Meaning if you were to look at a wavelength over here, I'll just highlight one. You're going to see that the wavelength is longer than it is in the previous diagram. This is because there's now more time between identical points on the wave. And that's what a low frequency wave looks like. It's more stretched out compared to a high frequency wave, which is more compressed. Generally speaking, high frequency waves have more energy than low frequency waves. So for example, when you're out in the sun all day, if you get a sunburn, that would be caused by UV light, which is a higher energy wave than, say, the visible light that we see every day. Okay, with that being said, that summarizes two main properties of waves. As I mentioned before, there are many types of electromagnetic waves, and the main difference between them is their wavelength or frequency. Let's take a look at the electromagnetic spectrum shown below. So there's a lot going on in this image. First off, at the top over here, we have the type of radiation. As you can see in the image, we have radio waves, which are literally what they sound like. This is the type of electromagnetic radiation that the radios in our cars tune into. Then we have microwaves, which is literally what it sounds like. So when you heat up food in a microwave, the microwave uses microwaves as a source of energy to heat up your food. Then there's infrared light. We as humans can't see infrared light, but some types of insects can. And this is the world we live in. We live in the world of visible light. This is the electromagnetic spectrum, which ranges in colors from red to violet. And you may remember the acronym ROY-G-BIV. which is red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. These are the different colors of visible light that we're able to see with the human eye. Next up, we have ultraviolet or UV light. That's what I mentioned is what causes sunburns. Next up, we have X-rays. So if you've ever received an X-ray at the hospital or at your doctor's office, they use this type of radiation to take an image of what's happening inside of you. And last, we have gamma rays. This is a type of electromagnetic radiation that is very energetic and can cause a lot of damage. It can be found in some of the far reaches of the universe. So I'd like you to notice a trend over here. As we go left to right in the electromagnetic spectrum, notice that the wavelength is getting shorter. So for example, radio waves and microwaves have a much larger wavelength than, say, X-rays. And this is true. As you go left to right in the picture, you're going to notice that the wavelength decreases. I'd like you to notice one more thing. As you go left to right, the frequency increases. We're going from low frequency waves to high frequency waves. And I mentioned above, higher frequency waves have more energy, and this should make sense. I'm sure you know from experience that an X-ray has much more energy than a microwave, let's say. So let's discuss some orders of magnitude over here. We're going to look at the wavelengths now of these different waves. Radio waves have a wavelength on the order of 10 to the exponent 3 meters. 10 to the exponent 3 is 1,000. So that means radio waves have wavelengths that are about 1,000 meters. Microwaves are much shorter. The distance between identical points is on the order of 10 to the exponent negative 2 meters. That's approximately 0.01 meters. So that's 1/100th of a meter, or about 1 centimeter. And as you can see, the wavelength is getting much, much smaller as we go left to right. Visible light is on the order of about 0.5 times 10 to the negative 6 meters. UV light even smaller, 10 to the negative 8. X-rays 10 to the negative 10, and gamma rays 10 to the negative 12. And the picture below gives you an idea of the approximate scale of the wavelength. So radio waves, we're talking about roughly things that are the sizes of buildings. For microwaves, we're talking about things that are roughly the size of insects. For visible light, we're now talking about objects on the cellular scale. So here we have an example of protozoans. This is a type of microorganism, but we keep zooming in. UV light is roughly on the order of the size of molecules. X-rays are on the order of atoms, and gamma rays roughly on the order of the things inside of atoms, nuclei. So us humans can only see with our eyes the visible portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. Meaning, out of all of these different types of radiation, us humans can only see roughly this very, very small portion I'm indicating above. All Alright, so a little bit of work for you to do. Please visit this website below. Okay, this is a website from NASA, so it's a credible source. And use that website to answer the questions that follow on the next page. This would be a good time to pause the video, try it on your own, and when you're ready, click play to resume. Okay, so first up, whenever you tune your radio, watch television, send a text message, or even make popcorn, what are you using? Well, believe it or not, you're using energy from the electromagnetic spectrum. This energy travels through the air in the form of a wave. Okay, from the picture above and the website, which waves have the shortest wavelength? We saw the waves of the shortest wavelength were gamma rays. And the waves of the longest wavelength were radio waves. Because gamma rays have a shorter wavelength, that means that they have a higher frequency. And because they have a higher frequency, they have more energy. And for radio waves, it's the opposite. They have a lower frequency and therefore less energy. What is a major source of energy waves across the full electromagnetic spectrum? Well, just look outside. For us, it's the sun. The sun produces waves across the entire electromagnetic spectrum, not just visible light. Visible light is just the portion that we're able to see. The sun also does produce a lot of damaging electromagnetic radiation, but we're protected from a lot of that by our atmosphere, as well as the Earth's magnetic field. Okay, next question. List 3 types of energy waves that are ionizing. So just for some context over here, ionizing radiation is radiation that has enough energy to break chemical bonds. So first of all, let's list the 3 types. The 3 types of energy waves that are ionizing include gamma rays, X-rays, and UV radiation, ultraviolet. These 3 types of waves are ionizing. What that means is they have so much energy that they can actually break chemical bonds. Now, that's bad for us because a lot of our important biomolecules including DNA, proteins within the body, for example. These can be damaged by X-rays, UV radiation, and gamma rays. And when this happens, you could do damage to your genetic code. Lucky for us, the human body has a lot of defense mechanisms in place to repair this damage. But unfortunately, damage accumulates or goes unnoticed by the human body. This can result in diseases like cancer, for example, which we learned about in the biology unit. So electromagnetic radiation can either be reflected, absorbed, or transmitted. If it's reflected, it just bounces off of a surface. If it's absorbed, all of the energy in that traveling wave is now transferred to the object. And transmitted means it just passes through. So for example, visible light passes through our atmosphere and makes its way to the Earth. Okay, carrying on. So from the same web page from earlier, we're going to continue to use that in part B, where we look at the anatomy of an electromagnetic wave. Click on that link titled Anatomy, which you should find in the right-hand column of the web page, and use that website to answer the questions below. Once again, this would be a good time to pause the video, try it on your own, and when you're ready, click play to resume. Okay, first question, can sound waves travel through the vacuum of space? So first of all, what do we mean by the vacuum of space? The reason why we use this terminology is because space has no air, meaning there's no oxygen, no nitrogen, no carbon dioxide. So there's basically no medium. Sound waves are a type of wave, but they're different from light waves. Sound waves actually require a medium or a material to travel through, and therefore sound can't travel through space. This means if there was an explosion in space, you wouldn't be able to hear it. Okay, next question. What two vibrating energy fields make up electromagnetic waves? We mentioned this earlier in the lesson, but light consists of oscillating electric and magnetic fields. Okay, next question. Do EM waves, so EM just stands for electromagnetic, do EM waves require a medium? And second question, list materials that electromagnetic radiation can travel through. So first of all, lucky for us, electromagnetic radiation does not require a medium. Think about it. How does the energy from the sun make its way all the way through space to the Earth? There's nothing in space. There's no medium for the waves to travel through. So therefore, electromagnetic waves do not require a medium. As for the materials that EM radiation can travel through, really anything. They can travel through air, they can travel through water, different types of solids like glass, for example. Unfortunately, people, if we absorb, say, UV light from the sun, all right, part C, you're going to visit a different website for this one. This is also a website from NASA, so it's a reputable source. And you're going to use that website to answer the questions below. When you're ready, click play to resume. Okay, first question. How does one form of electromagnetic radiation differ from another? So how are radio waves different from microwaves? In other words, how is the energy you use to heat up your food different from the energy you use to send text messages? Remember, all of this falls under the electromagnetic spectrum, but what's different about them is their frequency and wavelength, or alternatively, the energy carried by the wave. All right, next up, we're gonna label the following picture below. So we definitely already saw a very similar image earlier in the lesson. First up here, we have radio waves. These are on the order of about 10 to the 3 meters, which is the size of buildings roughly. Then we have microwaves. These are on the order of about 10 to the negative 2 meters. Remember, that's about 1 centimeter. This is followed by infrared light. Then visible light, UV light, X-rays, and gamma rays. Those last three types of electromagnetic waves are ionizing. These are the ones that can cause damage. So, which of these can make its way to the Earth? In other words, which ones can penetrate Earth's atmosphere? I mentioned earlier in the lesson that the Earth's atmosphere protects us from a lot of damaging radiation in space. So radio waves can make their way through the atmosphere. Microwaves and infrared light cannot. Visible light can. And thankfully, the three types of ionizing radiation can't. All right, lastly, there's another website to go to, so please type in the link below. Answer the three questions that follow, and when you're ready, click play to resume. Okay, first question. So when you look around you, visible light is the only portion of the electromagnetic spectrum that we see. But the light that comes from the sun doesn't necessarily have a distinct color to it, so we often just call it white light. Or if you turn on a light in your house, it's probably some form of white light. But white light is actually a mixture of the 7 different colors of the rainbow. And we're going to list those colors in this question. We're going to list them in order from the longest wavelength to the shortest wavelength. So this is actually that handy acronym Roy G. Biv, which stands for red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. And the order of this acronym, conveniently, is written in order from longest wavelength to shortest wavelength. So as we go left to right, the wavelength increases. And the way this acronym is written is actually already in order of decreasing wavelength. So as we go left to right, from red light to violet light, the wavelength gets shorter. Alright, and this is actually going to be a place where the video will end. So I'm going to leave you to do questions 2 and 3 as part of homework, and that includes filling out the table on the next page. I hope you enjoyed this first lesson of the physics unit. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.